The laughter cut through the garage like the squeal of a blade on metal, sharp, mocking, and deliberate. Naomi Jones froze where she stood, her grease-stained hands clutching a rag, her pulse thrumming in her ears. The laughter wasn't new. She'd heard it before, many times, in different shapes and voices. But this was cruel in a way that made her shoulders tense, her jaw clench. "You?" The voice carried authority, money, the kind of arrogance that didn't need to shout to sting. The man's tailored shirt, barely wrinkled despite the summer heat, clung neatly against his frame. His wristwatch glittered with the kind of casual wealth that screamed indulgence. He stepped closer to the line of tools resting on the workbench and jabbed a finger in her direction. "You? A mechanic?" The crowd of grease-smeared men who filled the garage stiffened, some smirking, some frowning, none stepping in. They had seen scenes like this before. They knew how they usually ended. The man's smirk spread, thin and cutting. "Tell you what," he said, his tone dripping with mock generosity. "If you can fix this car, this engine right here, I'll pay you $100,000. Cash." He held up his fingers, rubbing them together like he could already feel the bills. "But if you can't," his gaze swept over the crowd, drawing them in like co-conspirators, then landed back on Naomi with deliberate weight. "Then you'll admit, right here in front of everyone, that you're nothing more than a fraud, a pretender, a little girl playing dress-up in her daddy's garage." The room went still. Tools clinked softly as they were set down. Even the hum of the overhead fluorescent lights seemed to dim. Naomi's chest rose and fell once, slow, deliberate. She didn't look away, didn't smile, didn't fidget. She had spent her whole life being underestimated, by customers who asked to see the real mechanic, by supervisors who doubted she could lift a transmission, by strangers who couldn't reconcile her dark skin, her soft voice, and her oil-streaked overalls with the expertise in her hands. Her voice, when it came, was low and steady. "Bring me the keys." The millionaire's brows rose. He hadn't expected her to answer, not like that. He had expected nervous laughter, excuses, maybe even tears. But not this. A chuckle rattled out of him, louder this time, baiting the crowd. He turned, raising his voice so it carried across the shop. "You heard her, boys. Let's see if this little mechanic can back up all the talk." The keys jingled as he tossed them across the room. Naomi caught them mid-air, the weight of them cold in her palm, heavier than they should have been. She closed her fist around the metal, and in her mind, another image surfaced. Her father's hand, calloused and warm, guiding hers around a wrench when she was 6 years old. "Engines are like people, baby," Henry Jones had told her in the quiet rhythm of evenings in their old garage. "If you listen long enough, they'll tell you what's wrong." Naomi slipped into the driver's seat of the sleek luxury car, the smell of leather mixing with the faint tang of oil in the air. She turned the key. The engine sputtered, wheezed, and coughed, before dying with a hollow groan. The garage erupted in laughter. The sound rolled off the walls, thick with disbelief and scorn. Naomi didn't flinch. She closed her eyes, leaning her head slightly to one side, listening to the memory of the sound that had just come from the engine bay. She wasn't hearing failure. She was hearing a story. "Pop the hood," she said. Two apprentices scrambled to obey, one of them grinning wide, his phone already in his hand, recording. The hood lifted, and the engine lay exposed. A labyrinth of wires, steel, and grease. Naomi stepped out of the car, boots scuffing against concrete, her every move slow, measured. She stood in front of the engine, and for a moment, just a moment, her eyes softened. Machines were her sanctuary. People lied, but engines? Engines never did. The millionaire leaned against a tool chest, arms folded, a smirk plastered on his face. "Take your time," he called out, his voice dripping with mock courtesy. "We've got all day to watch the princess play." Naomi ignored him. She bent over the engine, her hands tracing the outlines of hoses and pipes, her ears tuned to the faint ticking of cooling metal. The smell told her part of the story. Too much unburnt fuel. The sound told her another. An uneven draw. A struggle. The feel beneath her fingers confirmed it. "The fuel injection system's clogged," she murmured under her breath. "What's that?" the man shouted, cupping his ear. "Did you say something?" But Naomi wasn't speaking to him. She was speaking to the machine, to herself, to the memory of her father standing beside her in that old garage, his smile patient, his hands steady as he guided her through her first repair. Naomi straightened, wiping her hands on the rag that hung loosely from her belt. The men in the garage leaned in closer now, curiosity mixing with the doubt in their eyes. They weren't used to seeing her command attention like this. Not from them, not in this space where sweat, steel, and muscle had long been considered a man's domain. She reached into her toolbox, her movements fluid, practiced, as if she'd done this 1,000 times before. And she had. Growing up, the garage had been her second home. While other kids were playing video games or running the streets, Naomi was under the hood of cars beside her father, Henry. He was a gentleman, but one whose voice could thunder when teaching her about patience, precision, and pride in her craft. She remembered the way the neighborhood kids would peek through the half-opened garage door, whispering to each other about that girl who worked on cars like she was born to it. She remembered, too, the way their laughter sometimes turned cruel, mocking her grease-stained clothes, her skin, her dreams of becoming not just a mechanic, but one of the best. But Henry had never let her fold. He'd simply hand her a wrench, flash that grin of his, and say, "Engines don't care what color you are, baby girl. They don't care if you're male or female. They only care if you know how to listen." And she had listened. For years. Now, standing in this high-end garage filled with men who doubted her, facing down a millionaire who thought her nothing but a joke, Naomi felt that same quiet fire her father had nurtured. She bent over the engine again, her hands working quickly now. She pulled out a flashlight, shining the beam deep into the belly of the machine, her mind assembling the puzzle. The clamps were too loose. The injector lines weren't aligned properly. Someone had done a sloppy job, masking the issue with quick fixes. She almost laughed. This wasn't just a broken car. This was sabotage, or, at the very least, negligence. "Need some help?" one of the mechanics called out, his tone teasing, though his eyes flickered with something else, something like respect. Naomi didn't even look up. "No." The millionaire's laugh rang out again. "Look at her, acting like she's solving world hunger instead of poking around in my engine. This is rich." Naomi's hand tightened on the wrench, but she forced herself to breathe. He wanted her rattled. He wanted her angry. That was how men like him won, by dragging you into their performance. Instead, she said quietly, almost to herself, "You really shouldn't drive this until I'm done. Another 5 miles, and you'd have blown the whole engine." The garage quieted again. The men shifted uncomfortably. Even the millionaire's smirk faltered for just a second. But he quickly recovered, waving his hand like he was brushing off a fly. "Talk is cheap. Prove it." Naomi's gaze snapped up to his. Her eyes were steady, unblinking, the kind of look that didn't ask for respect. It demanded it. And for the briefest moment, he looked away. The silence that followed was filled only with the clicking of her tools as she got to work. She dismantled the faulty line with a surgeon's precision, her fingers moving fast, her mind 3 steps ahead. And all the while, the garage seemed to shrink around her. Its concrete walls, its buzzing lights, the smell of rubber and oil, it all blurred into the background. What filled her senses instead was the rhythm of the machine, the heartbeat of the engine, and the memory of her father's voice guiding her. But even as she worked, she could feel the weight of eyes on her. The men watching. The millionaire leaning there, smug, itching for her to fail. The phone camera recording from the corner, its red dot blinking like a live countdown. She knew what was at stake. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just proving him wrong. It was about every time someone had rolled their eyes when she introduced herself as a mechanic. Every time a customer had asked to speak to the man in charge. Every time someone had whispered that she didn't belong. Her fingers tightened around the wrench. She would not give him the satisfaction of being right. Naomi steadied her breath, reaching for a fresh set of tools. The air inside the garage seemed thicker now, charged with anticipation. The millionaire leaned against the polished hood of a nearby luxury car, his suit catching the fluorescent light, a smug grin never leaving his face. He was enjoying this. Her every move felt like his entertainment. A circus act he was sure would collapse under its own weight. "You've got, what, 15 minutes before I get bored?" he said, glancing at his gold wristwatch. "After that, we'll call this whole charade off, and you can go back to changing tires for soccer moms." The mechanics exchanged looks. Some smirked nervously, but others shifted uncomfortably. They knew engines. They knew what Naomi was doing wasn't simple, and they knew that kind of pressure could rattle even the best. Naomi ignored him, though her jaw tightened. Her father's voice echoed again in her mind. "When people try to rush you, it's because they know time is your weapon. Engines don't bow to clocks. They bow to skill." She kept her pace deliberate, precise. Her hands moved with rhythm, removing damaged parts, aligning replacements, tightening bolts to exact tension. Sweat trickled down her forehead, but she didn't falter. The machine, once a snarl of chaos, began to reveal its pattern, its flaw, its hidden truth. Then, snap. The sound was sharp, metallic. The entire garage winced. Naomi froze for a split second, her heart hammering. One of the old bolts had cracked in her hand, splintered from years of stress and misuse. The millionaire's laughter filled the space like smoke. "Well, well, I guess Daddy's little girl isn't cut out for the big leagues after all. Maybe I should have offered $10 instead of 100,000. The crowd chuckled uneasily. A few of the mechanics shook their heads. One muttered, "She's done." Naomi felt her throat tighten. For a moment, shame threatened to choke her. She could almost hear the whispers of every doubter from her past, all the voices telling her she wasn't enough, that she was just playing pretend in a man's trade. But then, she remembered. The way her father had shown her a broken bolt once, smiling as he tossed it in her palm. Every piece has a breaking point. The question is, do you? Her grip tightened around the snapped bolt. No, she would not break. Without hesitation, Naomi tossed the ruined piece aside and reached deeper into her toolbox, pulling out a spare she had insisted on keeping, despite others calling her over-prepared. She replaced it with a swift, confident motion. The mechanic's murmurs turned from dismissal to curiosity. She had a backup. one whispered. She knew this might happen, another said, almost impressed. The millionaire's smirk faltered. Naomi didn't look at him. She kept working, her focus absolute. But she could feel the room shifting. The laughter was thinning, doubt was crawling its way onto the millionaire's face, even if he tried to mask it. Minutes passed. The rhythm of her tools against steel echoed like a drumbeat of defiance. The smell of oil thickened in the air. The crowd had grown. People from outside the garage had wandered in, pulled by the sound of raised voices and the strange spectacle of a woman challenging a millionaire's arrogance. Phones lifted higher. Cameras zoomed closer. The red recording lights seemed to multiply. Naomi knew. Whatever happened here tonight would not stay in this room. It would be broadcast, dissected, judged by thousands, maybe millions. Finally, she straightened. Her hands were black with grease. Her face damp with sweat, but her eyes burned with clarity. She turned the ignition key. The engine sputtered once, twice. The millionaire's grin began to return. Till... roar! The car's engine came to life. Steady, powerful, purring like it had been reborn. The sound filled the garage, drowning out every doubt, every smirk, every whispered insult. It was the sound of vindication. The crowd erupted. Gasps, cheers, applause. It was chaos. The mechanics stared in disbelief. One of them actually dropped his phone, the camera clattering against the floor. The millionaire's face drained of color. For the first time, he looked small, almost pathetic, in his tailored suit. Naomi didn't gloat. She simply stood there, wiping her hands with calm precision, her eyes fixed on him. "You were saying something about $10?" she asked softly, her voice carrying through the noise. The crowd roared louder. The millionaire tried to recover, his voice cracking. That doesn't prove anything. It was luck, a trick. I bet this heap won't last a mile." "Then drive it," Naomi replied. The garage fell silent again. All eyes swung to him. Drive it, in front of everyone. Prove she was wrong, or admit he was too afraid. His lips parted, but no sound came. His hand twitched at his side, clenched into a fist, then loosened. He didn't move toward the car. He didn't even look at it. Because deep down, he knew, if he turned that key and drove, Naomi's work would hold. And his entire bet, his entire insult, his entire performance would collapse on camera. So he stayed still, and the silence said everything. The silence inside the garage was thick, almost suffocating. The only sound was the steady purr of the engine Naomi had resurrected, like a lion daring anyone to doubt its strength. Naomi crossed her arms, her face calm, but her eyes piercing the millionaire like twin blades. She didn't need to raise her voice. The machine had spoken for her. "Drive it," she repeated. All eyes locked on the man in the suit. His arrogance, the smug laughter, the casual cruelty seemed to wilt under the weight of 100 stares and a dozen phone cameras recording every twitch of his face. For the first time, he looked trapped. I don't need to prove anything to you," he stammered, straightening his lapels. "This was just entertainment, a joke. You all are blowing it out of proportion." But the crowd wasn't buying it. "She fixed it," one mechanic said loudly. "She proved you wrong," added another. "You owe her 100 grand," someone shouted from the back. The chant started small, like a flicker of flame. "Pay up! Pay up!" Then it spread, gaining rhythm, gaining force. "Pay up! Pay up! Pay up!" Phones lifted higher, the crowd's voices booming against the concrete walls. The millionaire's cheeks reddened. He tugged at his tie, sweating despite the cool night air seeping through the open garage doors. Naomi didn't chant. She didn't smirk. She simply waited, calm, unmoved. A woman who knew her worth didn't need to beg for recognition. But she wasn't done yet. Because this wasn't just about an engine. It was about every man who had told her she didn't belong, every boss who had paid her less, every sneer and whisper behind her back. Tonight, she wasn't just proving herself. She was proving them all wrong. She stepped forward, her boots clicking against the concrete floor. The crowd hushed. Even the engine seemed to quiet beneath her presence. "You know," she said slowly, her voice low but carrying. "My father used to tell me engines don't lie. You can fake confidence, you can fake wealth, you can even fake respect. But when metal meets hands, when skill meets challenge, the truth shows up." The millionaire swallowed hard. His jaw worked, but he didn't speak. Naomi took another step closer, close enough that the cameras could capture her expression. A mix of strength, exhaustion, and fierce pride. "And the truth is, you bet against me because of who I am. A woman. A black woman in a trade you thought belonged only to men. You didn't want me to fail because of the car. You wanted me to fail because I reminded you of a truth you can't stand, that people like me can do this better than you ever could." The words sliced through the garage. Gasps rippled across the crowd. The millionaire tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "Don't flatter yourself. This is ridiculous. I'm not standing here to be lectured by some grease monkey." The crowd booed, loud and unrelenting. Even the mechanics who had doubted Naomi earlier were on her side now. Naomi raised her hand, and the noise dimmed. She didn't need the crowd to fight her battle. "You don't have to like me," she said, her voice steady. "But you will respect me, and you will honor your word. 100,000, in front of everyone here, in front of the world watching on those cameras. You said it. Now prove you're a man of your word." The garage held its breath. The millionaire's face twisted. His pride warred with the reality of the cameras capturing every second. If he refused, his reputation would collapse in flames. If he paid, he'd be admitting defeat to the very person he had tried to humiliate. Finally, with a trembling hand, he reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and tapped furiously. Moments later, the ping of a transfer notification sounded from Naomi's phone, tucked in her back pocket. $100,000! The crowd erupted into cheers so loud the walls shook. Some of the mechanics clapped, others whooped, a few even wiped their eyes. The chant shifted from "Pay up" to "Naomi, Naomi." The millionaire stood frozen, humiliated, his face pale. Cameras zoomed in on him, capturing the exact moment arrogance gave way to defeat. He tugged at his tie again, desperate to escape. But there was nowhere to go. Every exit was blocked by the sheer weight of shame. Naomi didn't gloat. She didn't rub it in. She simply nodded, her father's voice echoing in her heart. Engines don't lie, and neither does truth. She turned, placed her hand on the hood of the purring car, and whispered, "We did it, Dad." The cameras caught it all. The quiet grace, the strength, the undeniable victory. And outside the garage, the video was already being uploaded, already racing toward virality. The world was about to know Naomi's name. By the time the millionaire stumbled out of the garage that night, face flushed and eyes downcast, the video was already spreading online. The moment Naomi whispered to her father's memory, hand resting on the car she had just revived, became the clip that millions would replay over and over again. Within hours, hashtags began to trend. Hashtag Naomi fixed it. Respect. Her hands, engines don't lie. Mechanics, car enthusiasts, and everyday people shared the clip, some with tears in their eyes. Women in trades, especially women of color, flooded Naomi's inbox with messages. "You don't know me, but you gave me courage tonight." Others sent photos of their own work. Paint-stained hands, welding masks, toolboxes, with captions like, "For all of us who were told we couldn't." News stations picked it up. Talk shows invited her for interviews. Brands reached out with offers. But Naomi didn't care about any of that. What she cared about was walking into her little garage the next morning, the smell of oil and gasoline grounding her, and knowing she had finally been seen. Because, for so long, she had worked in shadows, fixing what was broken, quietly carrying her father's lessons, waiting for the world to notice. Now the world was watching. And the millionaire? He couldn't escape the fallout. His name, once synonymous with arrogance wrapped in wealth, was plastered on headlines that shredded his reputation. Businessman shamed after sexist bet backfires. Millionaire pays $100K after losing to black woman mechanic. His peers whispered, his board members questioned his judgment, and investors began pulling away. He had tried to laugh off the bet as a joke, but the internet never forgets. And what the internet saw wasn't a joke. It was prejudice in plain sight. Meanwhile, Naomi's garage turned into a symbol. Young apprentices started showing up, asking if she would mentor them. Women who had never thought of picking up a wrench signed up for automotive programs, inspired by her story. Even the city council invited her to speak about trades education and representation. But for Naomi, the most important moment came weeks later. She was closing up the garage, the sky painted in strokes of violet and gold, when a little girl wandered in with her mother. The girl clutched a toy car in her hand, grease smudged across its tiny hood. "Are you the lady who fixed the car on the video?" the girl asked, her eyes wide. Naomi smiled, kneeling down. "That's me. You like cars?" The girl nodded fiercely. "I want to fix them too. But people laugh when I say that." Naomi reached out, gently taking the toy car. She rolled it across her palm, then handed it back with steady eyes. "Engines don't lie," she whispered. "Neither do dreams. Don't let anyone laugh you out of yours." The little girl's grin could have lit the entire garage. Her mother's eyes welled up, and she whispered, "Thank you." Naomi watched them leave, her chest heavy and full at once. She realized then that the real victory wasn't the money, or the fame, or even humiliating the millionaire. It was this, the ripple effect. The little girls who would believe in themselves. The women who would stop apologizing for their passions. The men who would think twice before underestimating them. That was the legacy. As she locked up the garage and stepped into the night, Naomi looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, she felt her father's presence. The same man who had put the first wrench in her hand, who had told her engines tell the truth, who had believed in her when no one else did. "I hope you're proud," she whispered into the sky. The wind shifted, warm against her face, as if carrying an answer she could feel but not hear. And as she walked toward tomorrow, Naomi knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. Because sometimes, one act of courage is enough to change the whole world.